And this afternoon, we are staying on top of the war between Israel and Hamas and the impacts it's having right here in the United States. We want to begin in the Middle East. Israel's military campaign in Rafah, a city in the south of the Gaza Strip, is expanding. Millions of innocent Palestinians have sought refuge in Rafah, mainly because they were told it was safe. But now Israeli tanks are appearing in the streets, and the army has seized control of many of the city's highways. The outrage and concern over how Netanyahu is waging his war against Hamas is fueling protests on college campuses nationwide. We've seen it for weeks now, and thousands of students here in Massachusetts and elsewhere are refusing to leave those encampments, demanding their schools divest from Israel. And all of this complicating matters for President Biden, who is on the record saying his support of Israel is, quote, ironclad. But Netanyahu's decision to move into Rafah led to the president to pause a shipment of weapons to Israel. Netanyahu is defiant, saying Israel will continue to fight alone if necessary. Now, we want to bring in NBC 10 political commentator Sue O'Connell to join this conversation and really help make sense of this all. Sue, let's begin with President Biden. Just how tight a spot is he in, with his base here in the U.S. and his commitment to help Israel in the Middle East?
Yeah, but it's a very tight spot, and not just with Biden's base, but it could be a test of the entire U.S.-Israel relationship. But in regard to the base, Biden has more than one base in regard to this issue. Some Democrats want stronger words and actions against Israel's efforts here. Some want more support for Israel. But this announcement is an indication that Biden's efforts behind the scenes, including speaking with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, is not working. So if Netanyahu continues to go forward with the Rafah invasion, Israel may cross what Biden has said is a red line. And if that happens, Biden and the U.S. are indeed going to be in a very tight spot in regard to Israel.
Okay, well, meanwhile, here at home, when you talk about stronger words here, do you think that the president will be taking a firm stance on college protests, and that if not, how can he defend himself from Republicans who say that the situation is getting out of control? I mean, we've been covering these encampments for weeks now, and some of these moments have gotten pretty tense on campus.
Indeed, Priscilla. But when Joe Biden was a college student way back in the last century, that was at a time when his fellow students were protesting the Vietnam War on college campuses everywhere across America. He was not a protester. And I think what we can take away from that, and that he ended up dedicating his life to public service, is that protests are just not his thing. Candidate Biden, he's really trying to put some space between him and some of that more radical behavior that we're seeing on campuses. But I don't think he's going to go much further than that. Look, as you point out, the Republicans are going to try to make this an issue, but there are a couple of challenges with that effort. First, the students are going to go home soon for the summer. And second, the situation in the Israel-Hamas war is ever-changing, ever-evolving, so we don't know where we're going to be around this issue when November rolls around.
Now, as this is a continuous discussion, how involved is the U.S. in ceasefire talks, and really what does that process look like?
So I don't know what the process looks like, and we know from history that sometimes we won't know what the process was until way after the fact, many years from now. But the U.S. is both trying to force Israel into better targeting to avoid civilian deaths and injuries, while negotiating with Israel and Hamas to get a ceasefire and get those hostages held by Hamas released and get aid to Gaza. So it's obviously a very complicated process, and it's made more urgent because of the human toll.
All right, Sue O'Connell joining us there live in the newsroom. Thanks so much. Now, you can catch Sue every Sunday here on NBC 10 Boston at Issue is on after Meet the Press at 11:30.